The Chicago Bears finally signed a free agent pass rusher. He doesn't ease all of my concerns, but he's better than nothing.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. On the show today, I want to break down new Chicago Bears edge rusher defensive lineman Tanoh Kpassagnon and where he fits into this rotation, what he offers for the Bears, how much of the need he fills, and maybe how much is still having question marks at that spot. We'll also get an injury update on Jaylon Johnson, whose time on the non-football injury list might be a little longer than we thought it would be, but not necessarily a concern for week one and the regular season. But the Bears did sign a cornerback replacement for some depth there. So we'll look at Tre Flowers and then also maybe some other remaining holes that we'd like to see them address, even as training camp goes on and gets started here this week. But as the team reported in full to training camp on Tuesday, General Manager Ryan Poles announced the signing of defensive lineman Tano Passeno, who I think occupies a big need on this roster, but maybe doesn't fill it completely, but certainly is an upgrade over what the Bears had on the bench at the pass rushing position, and gives you a little bit something more to have some confidence in. Like, all right, at least they've got more of an experienced grown up in the room. So Tano Kpassagnon had spent the last, 4 seasons with the New Orleans Saints, and 3.5 of those years were with Dennis Allen as his head coach. So clearly right away, I should say Dennis Allen was his defensive coordinator for the first year and then his head coach for the following years. But nonetheless, last 4 seasons playing in Dennis Allen's defense. So instantly that somebody like Tano Kpassagnon comes in and knows the system, knows the coaching staff knows him. Everyone knows exactly what they're getting here. There's not this, let's bring him in and see what the kid's got. It's like, no, we know what he is and we know what he isn't. And he's certainly not a starting caliber NFL defensive end. He's been a backup in New Orleans for a reason. He started a little bit, early in his career. He was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs in the second round when Ryan Poles was in their front office. So Poles has familiarity with him. Dennis Allen has familiarity with him. It's why it's a name we've mentioned multiple times on this podcast, really back since the beginning of free agency, but especially in the last month or two, as we looked at free agent pass rushing names for the Bears. I think I've said the name Tanoh Kpassagnon on this podcast 5 to 6 times in the last couple of months here. This is someone who has definitely been on the radar for that familiarity. But you look at his most recent season, he was just turned 31 in June, and he had 0 sacks in only 3 games for the New Orleans Saints last season. This is not someone who was a frequent part of the pass rush rotation this past season. This is someone who kind of quite literally fell out of the rotation in New Orleans and lost his role more and more. This is not a high-end rotational pass rusher who's going to come in and give you 10 sacks off the bench. The Saints had been kind of long building towards moving on from him, right? They drafted Peyton Turner in the first round. They brought in Chase Young as a free agent. They drafted Isaiah Foskey in the second round, Karl Grerson as a UDFA. They'd been investing along the defensive line for a while so that they wouldn't have to rely on Kpassagnon perhaps as much as they had to early in his career. But that being said, he's not a useless veteran camp body that's just going to get cut. This is a player who absolutely will be part of this Bears defensive end rotation and should be right now better than Austin Booker and Dominique Robinson. To me, he slots in as the new number 3 on the defensive line depth chart there, behind Sweat, behind Dio Dangbo. Kpassagnon is 3, and then Austin Booker and Dominique Robinson are competing for that 4th spot. Ideally, you would still like your number 3 to be better than Kpassagnon, but like, I think you would prefer he's your 4 and you have a better 3 than him, but he's still a better 3 than Booker or Dominique Robinson, especially like just a couple of years ago, right? 2024, he really didn't do much of anything for the Saints. He was kind of on his way out there. But in 2023 for New Orleans, he had 3.5 sacks off the bench, rotational role. Again, not a huge number that's going to blow you away, but as a pass rusher, he was reliable. And not a huge sack number, but had a lot of quarterback hits, had some tackles for loss in the running game there. And it may have been his best overall season as a pass rusher in terms of his productivity. The metric I like to use here, and it's not the end-all be-all for how good a defensive end is, but it's pass rush win rate, that PFF tracks. It's just, so it's not about sacks, hits, or hurries. It's just when you're going with a blocker in front of you, how often are you beating that blocker? Regardless of what happens next, did you get around your blocker? Did you beat him with your pass rushing moves? And if you look back in 2023, the last season that Kpassagnon actually played a real role in this Saints defense, he actually wasn't that bad. He was top 60 among edge rushers in the NFL. So if you think about every team has 2 starting edge rushers, that would be 64 starters. He was in the top 60 in pass rush win rate. I don't know that it's important to get into the specific numbers, and he was at 11.6%, but like his pass rush win rate 2 years ago, 2023, was pretty close to where Montez Sweat's was 2 years ago. The year the Bears traded for Montez Sweat, the most recent season of Montez Sweat, the pass rush win rate was not that much higher for Sweat than it was for Kpassagnon. That year he had a higher pass rush win rate than teammate Cameron Jordan. He had a higher pass rush win rate than DeMarcus Walker, again, in 2023. He had a higher pass rush win rate than current Bears starter Dayo Odeyingbo on the Colts that season. Like, I'm not here to say Kpassagnon was some elite pass rusher in 2023, but his pass rush win rate suggested a greater efficiency in terms of pressuring the opposing quarterback than his 3.5 sacks number from that season might suggest. So I'm not here to say like, oh, he's going to come to Chicago and be better than Odeyingbo or just as good as Sweat or any of these sort of hyperbolic things, but I do think he should be able to be better than his sack numbers suggest. This is a player who's not going to be Mark Anderson as your number 3, but can come in and cause some pressure sometimes, can get a couple quarterback hits. Like, he's going to be closer to average, more like kind of just a guy than a major difference maker on your team. But we're talking about someone who's coming off the bench just to give Montez Sweat and Dayo Odeyingbo a little bit of a break. Like, I think that's certainly a worthwhile investment for the Bears to bring in. I still would want to see them do more, but they're not going to. But I would like to see more. But too many things at the same time. I sure do feel a heck of a lot better about Kpassagnon as the number 3 than purely Booker or Robinson. Like, now Booker or Robinson can still rotate in as number 4. They still get their flashes in their playing time, and maybe they take a big step at training camp, but they could still beat out someone like Kpassagnon. And he's not guaranteed a major role or anything like this, but at least it's someone with a little bit more experience and proven productivity that you can trust at that position. I still would have preferred an even more proven pass rusher like, Zadarius Smith or whoever, and we'll see if maybe as training camp goes on, maybe the Bears say, hey, we got to do something else because even this wasn't enough. But for now, at least they're addressing it and acknowledging that, hey, we had to make some kind of move in this position. They also felt the need to make some kind of move at cornerback because it turns out Jaylon Johnson's non-football injury list status is a little bit more serious than we thought it might be. Not devastating, but nothing either. So we'll check in on Jaylon Johnson's leg injury and hear from general manager Ryan Poles next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Do you ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. I started using the Monarch Money app on my phone, and I love it because it's more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. Because I used to have an app for my savings account and my bank accounts, and then an app for my credit cards, and then an app for my retirement account through work, and then an app for my other investments. And you have to sign into 4 different accounts and remember 4 different passwords to keep tabs on all your finances. But with Monarch Money, you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's Monarch, M-O-N-A-R-C-H, monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Locked On Bears is also brought to you by our friends at Rugiet Ready. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. On average, in 15 minutes. And those effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. It's completely online. Rugiet connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use our promo code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET. Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. So the Bears added a cornerback in free agency in Tre Flowers, who we'll talk about in a second, but we should start with why, and that's Jaylon Johnson remaining on the non-football injury list a bit longer than we might have thought he would. And to me, this feels like something that is a bigger deal than we thought it would be, but still not like a crisis, panic, things are going to be horribly wrong type of situation. Like can we call it a medium deal? It's somewhere in the middle. I would say it's closer to not a big deal than big deal, because we know how good Jaylon Johnson is and how experienced he is. And yes, it is a new Dennis Allen defense, but especially with more man-to-man coverage in Dennis Allen's defense, sometimes that's just he knows how to cover guys man-to-man. There's less communication in that regard. There's less for corners, especially. There might be a little bit less on his plate that he has to be there to absorb, because he's played in the NFL for 6 or 7 seasons or 5 or 6 seasons, whatever he's been so far. But I think the way Ryan Poles described this is important context to apply here. And to be clear, Poles didn't answer questions about it. He even says in his quote, he doesn't go into further detail, just that Jaylon Johnson is dealing with some kind of leg injury. And I believe there was some reporting, I want to say from Brad Biggs of the Chicago Tribune, but I hope I'm not miscrediting that, but that it's some type of soft tissue injury. But Poles, you'll hear him say here, suffered it while doing his own training away from in between the end of OTAs to now start of training camp, and just working out on his own, suffered some kind of leg injury. But Poles uses some specific language here about how long Jaylon Johnson's going to be out. And then I also want you to pay attention, especially at the end. Poles gets a little bit softer at the very end when he kind of, I think, eases any, if not all, of the concern we might have in the bigger picture.
So NFI, Jaylon Johnson, he started on NFI there. When he was training, he had a leg injury. I'm not going to get into the details of that. It is going to take a few weeks before he can come back. We got a lot of faith that he's going to put in the time to rehab and be his full self when he comes back. I'm sure we'll have updates as we go through training camp, but it's going to take a little bit of time, but not overly concerned about long term.
So the tricky thing here, from what Ryan Poles said, is that we don't get a number, right? He needs a few weeks. It'll be a couple weeks. Is that 1 to 2 weeks? Is that 3 to 4 weeks? I mean, I don't think when he says a few, there's a certain cap on that, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on the semantics of the word few, right? But it feels like anything more than 4, a few weeks versus, he needs a month, right? That's kind of the delineation here. Anything more than 3 to 4 weeks, I think, would be exceeding expectations. To me, this feels like a 2 to 3 week type of situation, which is a big deal. That's a lot of training camp to miss. Training camp is the time that you're really installing a lot of the fundamentals of your team and building team chemistry and building, rapport and their relationships with the coaching staff and some of the intricacies of how they want to handle certain things on the back end. Jaylon Johnson will be missing stuff. And you don't just want to say like, oh, he's a veteran player, so he doesn't even really need to be there, so everything will be just fine. Like, yes and no. I mean, yes, he's a veteran player who is a very good player who will be able to totally catch up before week 1. It's not as though he's going to be like really far behind and like doesn't know what he's supposed to be doing out there in week 1 because he missed the first, say, 2, 3, or 4 weeks of Bears training camp. But like 3 weeks still puts him back in mid-August. Right? That's still almost a month of full practices before the season opener, right? Like this should be, if he maintains that timeline, should still leave him plenty of time to get ready. Like the Bears' second preseason game is August 17th. I'm not good at doing quick calendar math off the top of my head, but like 3 weeks from the time I'm recording this podcast would be August 12th. So if he was out for 3 weeks, he could even do 3.5 weeks. He could still be back in time for the second and third preseason games. And maybe the bigger point here is that Jaylon Johnson doesn't usually even play in preseason games. So it's not like he got to hurry back to be out there for the preseason games. Like if he could be back by, the 12th or 13th of August in a full 3 weeks, like that's a full month before the Bears. It's just about a full month before the Bears' week 1 game is on Monday night, September 8th. If he misses 2 weeks, he'll have a full month. And if he misses 3 weeks, he'll still have 3 weeks before the season opener. Like there's plenty of time for him to rehab and recover this current injury, get back up to 100% full health, while, by the way, still being around the team, still being in the meeting room, still watching film, still receiving instruction and playbook language and hearing everything that the defensive coaching staff wants from him and the cornerbacks, just not physically doing it out on the field. And so that to me is why it's not that big of a deal overall in terms of like big picture concern about this impacting the regular season. But I do get worried because the other thing Ryan Poles doesn't say is like, yeah, we're not worried about it in the long term, is what he says. But like, how long is the long term, right? Like, like when they say like, yes, this isn't going to be because the long term could mean this isn't going to be an injury that keeps him out of the regular season, but could they be worried about it re-aggravating at some point in this process? Like if you're starting training camp with a soft tissue issue and you're trying to recover and bring that back, if you're not 100% certain it is rock solid good to go, is there, I don't want to say like re-injury risk, but like all of a sudden, does there become more, what's the word? More vulnerability to that, right? Like, is there more of a chance of other soft tissue issues because you're already sort of starting out training camp with a little bit of that on the front end? Like, not that this leads to some debilitating season-ending injury, but like, is this the beginning of a chain of small injuries for Jaylon Johnson this season? Like that's my fear, is like, okay, he recovers from this, he's fine for 3 weeks, then has another hamstring thing or whatever in week 2 and misses 2 games, then comes back from there, is good for another 6 weeks, and then has a quad for 2 games. And Like, is there going to just be this like on and off where we look back at the season and go, man, it just felt like Jaylon Johnson was never quite 100%. He didn't miss a lot of games, but he was just kind of on and off dealing with this stuff all season long. And we're going to look back and then it really started with that non-football injury list stint at the beginning of training camp. Like, to me, that's the most realistic fear. Is that a phrase I can use there? Where I'm not saying that's how it's going to happen, but like, that's the fear that seems, like it has the highest likelihood of possibility among the fears, right? I'm not afraid of this becoming a season-ending thing, but of it being a lingering on-again, off-again thing that he has trouble completely shaking fully because this is already starting at the beginning of training camp. Maybe that's part of why the Bears went out and added more depth at cornerback. I don't think the depth addition at corner was about a long-term concern, but saying, hey, we are missing a guy at practice, so let's bring in another guy who we like a little bit more to just have another body out there while Jaylon's gone. Like, to me, that's maybe the bigger issue here. But I do want to check in on what Trey Flowers presents as a veteran free agent cornerback signing, and also what else we might still want to see the Bears do in terms of adding to this roster and filling out the depth here next on Locked On Bears. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back, so fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all of the overreactions we live for. And it's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. I'm playing on Yahoo Fantasy this year, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th. So stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. That's yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. The Chicago Bears added veteran free agent cornerback Tre Flowers, not to be confused with the pass rusher also named Tre Flowers, but that's Trey with a Y. This is Trey with an E. And for me, Tre Flowers fits in a similar category as somebody like Tanoh Kpassagnon that we just talked about in terms of caliber of player. This is not somebody who's going to come in and be a difference maker at the position, but you feel like, hey, it's another veteran who has some real experience and offers you a little bit more than, like, say, an undrafted rookie free agent that you have taken those reps at that spot. You want someone you just trust a little bit more just in case you need a body that's actually going to have to be on the field. That's what Tre Flowers can provide you. I don't think he's necessarily going to, like, say, make the 53-man roster automatically. Like, he's got a shot. I don't think he's a guaranteed no, but he's certainly not a guaranteed yes there. He ends up landing somewhere in the middle where there's a few guys on the roster that I think are in a similar position as him. And it's going to be a question of, like, who can step up and stand out. So you might remember Tre Flowers as a 5th-round pick by the Seattle Seahawks back in 2018. He started right away in his rookie season and his sophomore season. He was a starter for them on the outside, like kind of towards the end of the Russell Wilson era in Seattle, right? Wasn't a part of, like, the Super Bowl teams, but they were going to playoff games even with Tre Flowers as their starter as a young 5th-round pick. But then eventually left Seattle, was with the Bengals for a little while, has spent a year with the Falcons where he was a fill-in starter for them on and off, and now last year he bounced between the Jaguars and the Colts, and now there's a reason he's available at the start of training camp, right? He's not a super there's not a high demand for Tre Flowers' services, right? He's a guy who's going to play some special teams. He's also dabbled at safety a bit, and he's played some slot too, so he's got some positional versatility at 6'3", 200 pounds. The Ryan Poles specifically said cornerback when he mentioned Tre Flowers. He didn't just say DB, he said cornerback. So that means I would imagine they envision him as a corner and not someone who's added safety depth, but I think he does have some versatility there as a means of potentially trying to find a way on the 53-man roster as a backup who plays special teams and maybe offers you some multiple spots in the defensive backfield. But to me, like, he's right in the category with two other guys the Bears have brought in this offseason in the secondary, specifically at cornerback, that are all on a similar career path here. There's Nick McCloud, there's Tre Flowers, and then there's Nahshon Wright. Nick McCloud, they signed actually in March, one of those free agent signings that really flew under the radar because they were making so many other big moves. But Nick McCloud, like, has been a really solid backup and has occasionally filled in as a starter for the San Francisco 49ers the last couple of seasons. I think he, to me, is maybe the top backup on the depth chart, at least kind of behind Jaylon Johnson there. If we think about Tyreek Stevenson is competing with Terrell Smith and Zay Frazier, like, if that's kind of their own battle on that side of the depth chart, maybe then behind Jaylon Johnson, it's McCloud and Tre Flowers and Nahshon Wright. And I should say, McCloud had started like half of this past season with the Giants before going over to the 49ers. He'd been a starter with the Giants before that. So a guy who has bounced around, but has started in the NFL just like Flowers. And then Nahshon Wright was also brought into this offseason. He spent the last few seasons with the Dallas Cowboys as a backup there, and then was on the Vikings practice squad for 2024, but a third-round pick back in 2021. All three of those guys have NFL experience and have made NFL starts. I think McCloud and Flowers are clearly, I think, a bit more advanced and experienced than Nahshon Wright, and I think either or both of those guys, or maybe neither of those guys, could make the 53-man roster. Like, to me, I would kind of guess, not that we're going to do a full 53-man roster prediction right now, but like, you got Jaylon Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson, Kyler Gordon, Terrell Smith, Zay Frazier, those five for sure, and then probably Josh Blackwell is your number 6, because he's your kind of your backup slot corner, and you might only keep those 6 cornerbacks. So like, unless Nick McCloud or Tre Flowers or one of these other guys can beat out Josh Blackwell as a backup slot, or can beat out Terrell Smith as a backup on the outside, or if Zay Frazier is really bad and they want to try and stash him on the practice squad, I guess, but there's not a lot of room for, like, certainly not both of these guys to make the 53-man roster. But if they can prove to be a better special teams player, like for the number 5, 6, and even 4 corner on the depth chart, like that's going to be what matters most. And so these veterans that have been doing it a little bit longer could have some amount of, I don't want to say a leg up there, but certainly the experience advantage there. And none of these players have the coaching connection advantage there because the new coaching staff is trying to learn all these guys. I mean, if anything, Zay Frazier probably has the best intangible advantage because they just drafted him. So they probably don't want to have to cut a player they just drafted in that their coaching staff really believes in, but they got to keep the best players on the roster too. And if that doesn't happen to be Frazier, then it doesn't. And they live with that and try and build the best team they can for this season. But I still contend that if they're trying to build the best team they can for this season, they should do more in free agency right now. Like I know they don't have open roster spots. They just cut 2 players to sign Kpassagnon and Tre Flowers, but it's about upgrading, getting the best players for your team. We already talked about how I'd like to see them do more at the pass rusher position. I don't think Kpassagnon is enough for me. I would still go out and sign another one, to use a phrase of DJ Khaled. Like, you can never have too many good pass rushers, but assuming that's off the board, that this is their pass rush answer, and they're not really going to go make another big splash there unless there's an injury or something farther down the line. I think the next biggest priority for me would still be on the interior of the offensive line. If I was going to make one more veteran free agent signing, we've talked about it a little bit on this podcast before, but I look at the backups there, and Ryan Bates is your first option at either guard or center. And your second option is either 6th-round pick Luke Newman from Michigan State or former undrafted free agent Bill Murray, who started a game last season and looked okay. To me, I just don't love the depth there, given Jonah Jackson's injury history and given Drew Dahlman's recent injury history. That to me just feels like a position that I would feel more comfortable preparing for the worst case scenario that you have injuries and need to put multiple backups in the game, because there aren't multiple backups I trust to have to start games. And I would rather go out and get a veteran, kind of like a Tano Passeno, who's not a starting caliber player, but you just feel like, boy, he's got a little more experience than some of the other names that they're already relying on there. I think linebacker is in a little bit of a similar conversation. They seem to be ready to roll with 4th-round rookie Ruben Hippolyte, potentially as that number 3 linebacker next to Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. But then your backups are Noah Sewell and Amon Ogbongbemiga. They just don't have a lot of proven veteran depth there with defensive experience. Ogbongbemiga is a good special teams player. Sewell's a pretty good special teams player. But if either one of those guys had to fill in for Edwards or Edmonds, I would feel really insecure about that spot on my defense. And I think opposing offensive coordinators would attack that a lot. So I'd love to have another veteran there that just has a little bit more defensive experience under his belt, who can also contribute on special teams, similarly well as some of those guys. And then I suppose we can't discount the running back conversation. I've been saying regularly on this podcast that I didn't think they're going to go bring in a big running back. They're not going to make a running back splash. Would you like a little bit more veteran depth there? Someone like Jamal Williams from the Saints, I think, makes some sense to me there. I personally think they'll be fine with Swift and Johnson and Monungai, but I think it at least deserves consideration in this conversation, as does the backup safety spot. I'm not a big fan of Elijah Hicks or Jonathan Owens as your top 2 backups there. They have Tarvarius Moore, a couple undrafted free agents in Major Burns and Tysheem Johnson, so they have bodies there. But Dennis Allen likes to do some tricky little 3 safety packages sometimes, and we saw, obviously Brisker has an immense injury history that you hope is fine, but you got to prepare for the possibility that it might not be. And so, do you want to start Jonathan Owens for multiple games? He didn't look that capable in that position last year, and there's some good free agent safeties still out there that have played in Dennis Allen defenses before that I certainly would consider kicking the tires on. You don't have to guarantee them a bunch of money or give them a guaranteed roster spot, but just add more good players and let the battles kind of figure it out there. It doesn't feel like there's enough competition at safety, at interior offensive line, or at linebacker between guys that you really could value out on the field. I don't expect the Bears are going to make any more transactions immediately beyond the 2 that they just made. I think if they were going to sign a safety, a linebacker, a guard, or a running back to start training camp, they would have done it at the same time as these other 2. So I think they're going to let this roster as it is now sit for a couple weeks. If a player gets hurt, they'll make a change, but otherwise, I think they want to see how these guys do when they put the pads on before they make any other moves. And we'll have plenty more updates coming from Chicago Bears training camp right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you're coming back tomorrow and make Locked On Bears your first listen once again, because we'll hear from Ben Johnson about Caleb Williams and setting some goals for the season, about the left tackle battle and how they're approaching training camp with all the position battles across the roster. So a lot more Bears training camp coming for you, back 5 days a week now here on Locked On Bears. And I hope tuning in each and every day, making us your first listen, helps make it a little bit easier for you to bear down.